So welcome to Urban Montessori Charter School. This is actually the first time in our 12 years, or at least since I've been here, the last 6 years, that we're running an event over the summer for incoming families. It's been something that we've been planning on doing for years. Pandemic happened, we're moving, we started our own teacher training center, and so this is the first time that we've had the capacity to do this. So we're really excited that you're all here to kind of get a preview of what to expect for you all in the primary classrooms. We're so excited to have you all join our community, and I'm going to turn us over to Toby Garcia, our Director of Instruction, who's going to run this event for us. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Daniel. All right, can you all hear me okay? I'm going to try to move around the room a lot. I'm a mover. I talk with my hands. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to ground ourselves in community. Look around the room. This is going to be your school community for the next year, maybe longer. I want you just to turn, say good morning to a neighbor, an unfamiliar face. Maybe share your name, share your student's name. Just say hi. Like Daniel said, this is our first new to Urban Montessori, maybe your first time at school orientation. Our agenda for today. First, we're going to do a brief overview of what Montessori is, a little bit of a history of who Dr. Montessori was, and then how we bring Montessori to Urban Montessori, specifically how it shows up in your child's classroom. And then at the end, just a few notes about how to prepare your student, prepare your child, prepare yourself for the first day of school, for the 2 weeks out, and right now what we can do to start getting them ready. Before I start, I just want to gauge where we're at. Raise your hand if you are new to Montessori, if it's unfamiliar to you, if you're like, I think I saw it on a sign in front of the school. Raise your hand, just so I know who's in the room. Yeah, okay, awesome. All right, raise your hand if you're like, I'm familiar, my neighbor's child went to Montessori, I know a little bit about it, but not everything, not textbook. Raise your hand if you're in that sort of plane. Awesome. And raise your hand if you're a professional. You've read all the books, you've done a training, you've watched all the YouTubes, it's your #1 podcast. Awesome, cool. All right, so I just wanted to see who's in the room. So before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself. I wanted to ground us in letting you know where I'm coming from. I like to tell people that I have been in Montessori since, if you don't, my mother was a Montessori teacher. She was a public Montessori teacher in the east side of Louisville, Kentucky. So I grew up in Montessori until I was in about 3rd grade. And then I switched to traditional school because of our neighborhood. I grew up in the suburbs of Louisville, Kentucky, but my family lived in the Bay Area, so when I graduated, I wanted to go to the West Coast. So I made my way to California, enrolled in Cal State East Bay, and I did what every 18-year-old dreams of doing, fresh out of high school, fresh on their own, independent, following my mother's footsteps. And I went into education. So I got my degree at California State University. My emphasis is in human development, specifically childhood development. I was really curious to know how humans function, how they develop, how they think, how they enact their capabilities, more than I was interested in just traditional curriculum. So from there, my mother made her way out to the West Coast. She started a small preschool program in San Francisco, California. I worked alongside her for about 10 years in lots of different capacities: after school, teacher, summer camp, substitute, student yoga instructor, plumber. I did all of it, and then eventually I got trained and I started to teach alongside of her. Thank you. And I did that for about 3 years. She retired. I eventually took over the school, and I always felt like something was missing. I loved my program. I loved the neighborhood. I loved the community. I loved the parents. I loved the children. I loved the family. I loved it all, but something was missing. And I realized I wanted to be in the public sector. This Montessori is such a gift, and it should be shared with as many people as possible. There should not be a financial barrier in how we can reach and grab this type of curriculum. So we decided to sell our program. We sold our school in 2019, which was actually intuitively really smart because 6 months later, global pandemic happened. But we sold our school. I went and did my elementary training, and that brought me to Urban Montessori, where I've been for 6 years. I was 4 years in a lower elementary classroom. Last year, I moved into a coaching role, which I was the first part, like the front line for teachers, supporting them in their growth, observing classrooms, giving coaching sessions. And then this year, I've moved into my new role as director of instruction. So that's a little bit about me, just so you know where I'm coming to you all from. All right, so what is Montessori? Just a very quick, brief overview of 117-year-old pedagogy. So, 3 important ideas. First, who is Dr. Montessori? So Dr. Montessori was actually a doctor of medicine in Rome. During that time, women were pretty discriminated against. So she was not allowed to work alongside her male counterparts. She was one of the first women in Rome to actually graduate with as a physician. She was really invested and really interested, and eventually worked alongside psychiatric doctors and learned lots about the brain, which eventually led her to be really interested in education, which she studied under a lot of different theorists, and kind of started to develop this idea, this pedagogy of education. And so Montessori is a philosophy, it's a pedagogy where at the center of what we do is the child. We use this triangle chart to help us visualize how all of the different compartments work together. So you've got the adult, who is the teacher or the parent. In some cases, you have the environment, which can be a home environment, a classroom environment, and then you have the child. And so all these things work together. The adult prepares the environment is prepared specifically with materials, with learning things that the child can then independently use to sort of enact that self-construction, enact that learning. The adult also acts as a model or a guide when offering these lessons, offering these materials. And so why do we do this? Why is this our type of educational system versus a top-down? We aim to develop the whole child, not just the academic portion, but the whole child on a spiritual level. We aim to help them with independence, and in the primary, that's predominantly functional independence, right? You'll hear it a lot. Help me do it myself. We want to help children to learn how to do all of these things for themselves. So in 1907, the first CASA, or the first Montessori school, was developed by Dr. Montessori. She took over a child care center and tenement housing in San Lorenzo, Rome, where it was mostly, it was a poor neighborhood, and a lot of these children were not in like a traditional school setting. She brought all of these children inside this child center, and she just became an anthropologist and observed and noticed ways that they developed and how they thought, how they enacted their human tendencies, and really created this whole philosophy. And the result of it was that it was really, really successful. So she began a teacher training program, trained other teachers, and thus Montessori was developed and went really international. I I love this photo so much. I don't know if this photo is the first casa, if this was Casa de Bambini, but I love this picture because, right, this is 100 plus years ago, and these children, these materials, the way that they are working independently, the concentration, the focus, I still see these in our classroom today, and it's just such a glimpse of like those human tendencies, they don't change, right? So Montessori came up with this idea of 4 planes of development. And so there's 2 ways to look, there's 2 charts that you can look at the 4 planes of development, but I like this one. This is called the bulb chart. And the 4 planes are, the first plane is 0 to 6. This is where your child is at now. We call this the first plane. These are their primary years. And then the second plane is this 6 to 12. Oh no. 6 to 12, that's our elementary years. That's 1st grade through 6th grade. And then 12 to 18, those are our adolescents. Those are our middle school and high school students. And then from there, 18 to really 21, 24, that's our 4th plane, that's adult. And so the way we look at this bulb is the red is growth. It's cognitive growth, it's physical growth. And we see, like, in that first plane, there is a massive amount of growth happening, both cognitive, both emotionally, both mentally, right? And we know this about our children. The difference from 0, from an infant, to 6-year-old is wild. It is a huge leap. It's a huge amount of growth. And then in elementary, it kind of stabilizes off for a little bit. And then we hit adolescence, and we see more growth, right? That's when puberty happens. And then it kind of stables off a little bit. But looking at this first plane, right? This is, Montessorians consider this to be the most important period of life. This is not, it's not the age of university, it's not this emphasis on college, but it's this 0 to 6. This is where so much of that learning is happening. This is where a lot of that change, this is where a lot of skills, language, all those things can be developed. So a profound amount of growth in a small amount of time. All right, your turn to talk. Raise your hands and just share out one word that comes to mind when you're thinking about your 3 to 6-year-old. Yes. I'll take adults and then I'll go to students because they're eager to share. Go ahead. Energetic. Energetic. All right, tell me a word. How are you feeling right now? Shy, okay. Tell me another word back here. Curious. Curious.
Exploration.
Exploration. What else?
Expert.
Expert. What else?
Stubborn.
Stubborn, tenacity, for sure. Anyone else? Think of like, yeah, relentless. Negotiator, yeah. I think of like this intent to like do, right? This intent to like really master something. I saw a hand back here. Excited, yeah. How about tired, sleepy too, right? This is the point where they need a lot of sleep because of so much of this cognitive growth. All right. So lots of ways to describe our first plane children. Explorers. So thinking about this cognitive development, there's 2 really main driving forces. So we know that there's a tremendous physical and psychological development. Their personality is being solidified in this moment, in this time. Their will, their ability to choose, their ability to follow through. Their memory is developing more. And so there's 2 things that support this change. Dr. Montessori called these the absorbent mind and the sensitive periods. So the absorbent mind, Montessori likened it to like a camera. Everything in the environment, when that camera snaps a picture, it takes it all in, it captures it all in, free of discrimination, right? And that's how your child's mind is working. They are absorbing everything in their environment. It is effortless learning. That's why language is so easy to pick up at this age. That's why they model or they mimic your movements, your gestures, right? Good and bad. And so this absorbent mind, we take this into account when we're setting up our prepared environments or our classrooms, because everything around them, they're going to soak it in, right? So it's a loving, it's a nurturing, it's a caring space, but also everything in there has been put intentionally that everything they touch has some kind of developmental property. And then the next driving force is the sensitive periods. And I like to think of these as windows of opportunities. In fact, optimal windows of opportunities. So they're learning, they're developing all of these things, and they have these windows. And when they become open, if you flush them with all of the things they're craving, that's when they'll absorb it more. Thank you. Told you I talk a lot with my hands. That's when they absorb it more. And that's an optimal time for that particular learning. So the sensitive periods, there's several, but these are the ones that I like to hone in on. There's movement, right? This is when children are refining their movement, both fine motor and gross motor, right? They're learning to use more control with their hands, whether that's eating, whether that's riding. They're developing different types of grips. They're refining that gross motor, right? They're able to walk and run with a little bit more ease, kick a ball, throw a ball, right? And there's lots of ways in the classroom. In fact, I would argue almost everything that they touch in a primary room supports that refinement of movement. There's language, right? I think children, by the time they turn 6, have something like 5,000 to 10,000 words in their bank, in their vocabulary bank. So everything we give them is just rich in language. This is why second languages are so easy at this age. The environment is always set up with lots of opportunities to learn new words, learn new vocabulary. Order is another sensitive period during this time. Primary children have a very strong innate sense of order. And I cannot reiterate this enough. This order, this pattern of their day, of their schedule, even where their things are laid out in their room, they latch onto that, and that becomes safe and that becomes familiar. And we'll talk more about order when we talk about ways to set up your student for the first day of school. And the last one is this development of senses. This is when they're really refining those 5 senses, right? Their ability to tell the difference between textures, their ability to distinguish between taste, the ability to distinguish between different smells. So lots of ways in the prepared environment for them to refine those senses. So it's very complex, and that is just the Cliff Notes that I gave you. But how does this show up in school? In particular, how will this show up at Urban Montessori? So, the primary experience, what your children will experience every day in their primary classroom. So I'm going to go back to the triangle for a moment just to ground us. And again, we have our adult, which will be your teacher or your student's teacher. In fact, every child has opportunity to work with 2 adults. We have our lead teacher, and then we have an assistant teacher that supports the lead, your child, of course. And then the prepared environment, the classroom. And I know class placements have not been announced yet. Those will come soon. And we'll talk more about meeting teachers, orienting to the room in a little bit. So we have our prepared environment. We have our classroom that has been intentionally prepared for your child's age, plane of development in particular. This is our dolphin classroom. I took this a couple days ago. It's over summer school, but this is generally how it will look during the school year. Everything is child size. Everything promotes independence, the ability for your child to go and make a word choice and take it to a space to work on it and then return it independently. Everything is equipped with them in mind. And then there's 4 areas of the prepared environment, 4 areas of the primary classroom. We have our math, practical life, sensorial, and language. I'll go through those briefly. Math, we start with patterning, one-to-one correspondence. This is kind of like this pre-math work We start with grading, helping students build things from smallest to largest, or largest to smallest, thinnest to thickest, using a lot of that different vocabulary when they're describing sensorially what they're seeing. Eventually that moves on to recognition of quantity, to numeration, and then putting it together. So we teach quantity first, and then we introduce the symbols. There's practical life, which is I won't say everyone, I'll speak for myself, my favorite area in the primary environment. This is where they're really learning these functional skills, right? Which the direct aim of them is developing fine and gross motor, but also developing these skills to like prepare a snack for yourself, polish a plant, water a plant, feed the classroom animal, buttoning a shirt, zipping up a jacket. So lots of things to help them able to move through this world with a lot of agency. Next is the sensorial. This is the area where we work on refining those senses. This student is playing the bells, which they grade by tone. So they're refining their sense to hear tone and pitch. There's lots of different ways for them to refine their sense of touch, their smell, their taste. And then last we have language, and again it starts off with just like letter games, sound games, learning letter sounds before they're introduced to the symbol. From there they learn to blend, and then eventually write. Montessori was so creative in that she developed a set of wooden alphabet letters. So children who aren't able to physically hold and write a pencil, but can like sound out words, are still able to write with the help of this movable alphabet and putting these letters together. This student here, this is like a step up. This is called a story box, and she wrote like 3 sentences about, I think it was a yellow chihuahua she wished she had, and she would name it Marshmallow. And it was such a lengthy story, and she didn't have to use that physical labor to write. She was able to use these letters. Okay. And then another breakdown of how a primary classroom looks is we have our visible curriculum and our invisible curriculum. So our invisible curriculum, we call it grace and courtesy, right? So many parents are like, well, what are the rules? Like, what are the limitations? What are they allowed to do? What happens if they break a rule? And in Montessori, we don't really have hard, fast rules. We teach grace and courtesy. Grace is the awareness of yourself, of your body, of your space. And courtesy is awareness of others. And I love this picture so much because this is Miss Deja, right here on the left. And then this is Ronnie. And Ronnie is playing and or maybe getting a lesson on the tone bars. And you see the 2 children in the back. And they're not reaching to grab the mallet, my turn, my turn, my turn. They are being quiet, passive observers in the background, just watching, just listening, knowing that there will be an opportunity for them to have a turn, have a lesson. So that's grace and courtesy. So with grace and courtesy, again, because at displaying they're such cognitive learners, they're watching everything that we're doing. So the first thing is that we model, right? We model how to walk on a line while holding an object, right? Controlling that movement. And then it's the child's turn. Show me how to walk on that line. It's your turn, right? Watch how I push in a chair. And then the child does it. So they're reenacting, they're learning through observing, and then doing it in their own body. And then the last one is we do, right? They're in this community where there's this unspoken agreement that we're all going to do this one thing the same way. And because their peers have that buy-in, they're more supported in making those choices. This picture on the far right was at my school in San Francisco, and these are 3- and 4-year-olds. We ate lunch as a community, one long table, family style, every single day. And they sat with each other, they had conversations, they didn't get up and leave the table unless it was time. And it's hard to believe with 3-year-olds, but really when the whole community has that buy-in, they all want to do it. And they're all happy too. And then we have our visible curriculum. So again, our 4 areas of the classroom, our practical life, our sensorial, our math, and our language. These are all parts of the curriculum where you actually see tangible results, whether it's coming home on a piece of paper or whether it's a skill that has been developed or that has arrived from it. All of our visible curriculum comes out of the 4 areas. So I'm going to zone in on practical life for a moment. I won't go through all the different areas, and we'll just talk about some of the ways that this curriculum is lifted from some of these practices. So practical life, for example, supports independence. We're giving children functional tools that are their size, that are child size. So yes, they use real knives. They might be a little blunt, but we teach them how to handle them with care. We model how to use them, and then we trust and we give them the agency to replicate. They all meet a need or have a purpose. And they follow a complex motor sequence, right? So the further they get deeper into some of these practical life works, some of these lessons can have 20, 21 steps to it, and that child can follow all the steps by step, and then final step of putting it back where they found it. All right. So I need a volunteer for this one. I thought we would do a practical life lesson and just see what kind of lifts from it. Do I have any adult volunteers? Awesome. I thought I would have some apprehensive parents. So I'm going to give you an Urban Montessori mug as an appreciation token for coming up. Alright, so this is just kind of how a teacher would, I'm going to model how a teacher would give a lesson to a student. And I'm going to say, I hope everyone can see me. Tell me your name. Dominique, nice to meet you. Hi, Dominique. Okay. Dominique, I would like to show you something today. And I'm actually going to turn it this way. Watch. Give Dominic a round of applause. Fill it up with coffee on your way out the door. All right, that's a pretty simple lesson, water pouring. There's a few things that come before it, there's many things that come after it. That lesson would likely be introduced maybe at the beginning of the 4-year-olds here, or 3-year-olds really primarily. So let's see what lives from that lesson. Raise your hand if you want to share anything you noticed about how it was presented, how the student received it, anything that you would think that maybe the student would gain from pouring water from one pitcher to the other. I'll take an adult hand before I call on TJ. Tell me.
Very little verbal instruction before demonstration.
Yeah, no verbal, right? I wasn't talking through it the whole time. I was letting just my actions speak to the child. What else?
It was presented as an offer. Would you like to?
Yeah, it was an offer. It wasn't a request, a demand. It was an offer, right? And she was happy to do it because look at that blue water. Look at the real glass materials. What else? Anyone else before I? All right. Oh, tell me.
Not a lot of like over explaining your direction.
Yeah, not a lot of direction, right? My movements kind of spoke to her. She understood the assignment, right? So that one little lesson, that one little practical life, just pouring one pitcher of water to the next and then back, has so many developmental properties, right? On the surface of it, now I see that Dominique is capable, right? I trust that Dominique can pour water from one vessel to another, specifically a pitcher, without my help. She demonstrated to me when it was her turn that she was capable, and she could do it independently. If that were a real student, I would have just walked away and let her just sit there and pour until she was content, right? It's also meeting a real need. Now Dominique can pour orange juice from the pitcher I have on the snack table into her cup without me. She does no longer need me to do this for her. And then kind of underneath this surface, we have other developmental needs that are being met. There's a means of concentration. Did you see how focused she was on pouring that water? Right? Our students will sit with something that is interesting to them and develop and strengthen and refine that concentration, which will show up in the later years when they're really put to the test with their academics. There was an integration of body and mind, so now the child's connecting what they're thinking to how their hands are moving. And they're using these senses and they're using it in a purposeful way. There's a coordination of movement, right? I put my hand under the pitcher so I could have a lot of control as I poured. Dominique didn't need to do that. She was able just to go straight with that wrist. They're also developing this wrist movement, right? They're also developing this grasp, which shows up when they're writing, when they're doing cursive, when they're holding a pencil. And then finally, there's an adaptation of culture. The whole class is pouring pitchers of water. I want your child to pour pitchers of water too, being part of this class culture, being part of this community culture. How this shows up from room to room is very unique, how it shows up from home to home, but giving them these skills so they can be part of that culture, part of that community. All right, so I've overloaded you all with lots of things. Let's talk logistics, let's talk brass tacks, things that you really want to know. First thing is schedule. No. Give me a second. All right, first thing is our schedule. Here's your child's day. Our gates open at 7:45. If you want to let them come early, if you need to let them come early, be on the playground before school starts, you're welcome to drop them off at the bottom of this ramp here. You can walk them all the way to the gate if you like, but then they come in by themselves. They can meet their friends on the yard, play a little bit if you need that early care. Classroom doors open at 8. So this front door will open at 8 o'clock. If you want to drop them off at 8, you can drop them off at the bottom of the stairs. Their primary teachers will be out there to receive them. And they walk up the stairs and they'll go inside with their teacher. Let's see. Recess is from 11 to 11:30. We have 2 specific play areas for primary students. We have our main play structure here, and then we have this primary yard, which is equipped with smaller things to help develop some of that gross motor, walking on a beam, small basketballs, bean bags to toss. So there's 2 options for them. The equipment is not too high and it's supervised by all the teachers. Then we have lunch, which happens inside the classroom, whether you opt to do a school lunch or you bring your own lunch, everyone eats together. And then from 12 to 3, we have what we call the afternoon work period. I skipped the morning work period. I'm sorry. From 8 to 11, we have the morning work period. That's our 3-hour work cycle. That's when they're given one-on-one lessons. That's when they're able to make those independent choices. That's when they're moving around the room with some freedom and discipline. And then they do that again in the afternoon. And then if you opt in for extended daycare, that's from 3 to 6. If you have questions about that, you Melody is your person, melodyw@urbanmontessori.org, about getting enrolled in that aftercare. You want to email her. There's lots of different activities, and the primary students are all kept together for that extended day, so they're kept with that same group of students. If you have questions about enrollment at Urban Montessori. And then if you have general questions that I won't answer in our Q&A coming up, you can also message me independently. I'm at Toby at Urban Montessori. And then we have our new student orientation meet and greet. This is the day where you'll bring all of your students. They're going to meet their teachers. They're going to see the classrooms. They're going to get a feel for what it's going to feel like inside the room with their new adult. That's Tuesday, August 13th, 9:30 to 10. Yeah, and that's the day before school starts. All right, so I've got one more slide. Everyone got a picture of this one? Okay. No? I can pull back up too. All right. So our final part, where do I start? How to best prepare your child now all the way leading up to that first day of school. So what do we do now? Remember when I said, help me do it so I can do it by myself. Any functional independence that your child is striving to do now, support them in developing those skills before they come to school. A big one is pulling their pants up, buttoning their buttons, zipping their jacket, putting on a coat, putting their shoes on, getting a glass of water. All of these things are going to be really helpful once they're in a room with 20-something other students being able to have that agency, have that independence on their own. So that's a now. 2 weeks out. This is create a routine and stick to it, right? This is your bedtime routine. This is your morning routine. What are we doing before bed? We're going to brush our teeth. We go get our favorite book. We lay in our bed, we read. Lights are out at this time. It's predictable. Side note, read to your children every single day. Help them start to develop those literacy skills so that they're better prepared when they come in and they're doing it intentionally. Sound games are fun. My favorite one to play with primary students is when they're having lunch, I say, eat something, take a bite of something that starts with and they're like, sandwich. I'm like, yeah, you know? Play some sound games, read every day. Create a routine. A morning routine, it's the same every day. It's safety, it's predictable. They know what to expect. And so when the first day of school rolls around and you're like, no, you have to brush your teeth, get your bag. They already know what it is. They know where their bag is. They know where their clothes are. They know what to expect. They know what's coming next. Our first playing children have that deep sense of order. So help give them that order. And then our final one, and this is a big one, and it requires you to be so brave. When you drop your students off on day one, keep drop off quick. Yeah, it's hard for parents. I see a lot of tears from parents. When you drop your children off, walk them to the bottom of the stairs. Please don't go on the stairs, adults, because what adults do is they come down the stairs, bye, I love you, and there's little kids behind them and they knock them. So please don't go on the stairs. Stay at the bottom. I love you. Have a great day. This is so exciting. Hug, kiss, bye, and walk. Your teachers will be out there. I will be out there. If you cry, I get emotional. I don't need to get emotional the first day of school. So keep drop off quick. But truly, your children need to feel a sense of confidence from you. And that sense of confidence is going to help them feel safe as they move into this whole new world. Alrighty? Alright. That's all I have. I'm ready to hear questions. Thank you. I'm going to go